I am Bo, 58 years old, and I spent my entire life working construction to support my family. Last year, I hit the jackpot $62 million. When I saw those numbers match my ticket, my hands trembled uncontrollably. Instead of telling everyone I made a decision that would change everything, I kept it secret and pretended to need financial help from my family. What I discovered broke my heart, but ultimately set me free. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. Hit that subscribe button and stay with me to see how I turned betrayal into the most dignified comeback of my life. I still remember the day I first picked up a hammer on a professional job site. I was barely 23, young and full of energy, convinced my muscles would never fail me. Fast forward 35 years, and my body told a different story. Every morning started with cracking joints and lingering pain from decades of lifting, bending, and climbing. Construction work was never glamorous, but it put food on the table for my family, and I took immense pride in that. My modest 3-bedroom house in Portland was nothing fancy, but I had paid it off 5 years ago. The mortgage payments had been a struggle, especially after Sandra left me for Richard, her dental surgeon with the Mercedes and vacation home in Aspen. That was 12 years ago now, but the sting of betrayal never fully faded. I kept telling myself I was better off without her materialistic attitude, but loneliness has a way of making even bad memories seem better than they were. After Sandra left, I doubled down on being there for our kids. Tyler was 20 at the time, just starting college, and Ashley was 17, still in high school. I worked overtime, took weekend jobs, anything to make sure they had what they needed. College tuition nearly broke me, but I never let them know how close to the financial edge I really was. I wanted them to focus on building their futures, not worrying about their old man. Tyler graduated with a business degree and quickly climbed the corporate ladder at a marketing firm in Seattle. He started at entry level, but was now some kind of executive making 6 figures. We talked maybe once a month, usually brief calls where he seemed distracted, often ending with, "Sorry, Dad, gotta run to a meeting." His Christmas and birthday visits became shorter each year, sometimes just a quick dinner before he headed back to the city. Ashley followed her fashion dreams to New York after design school. I never quite understood her world of runways and seasonal collections, but I supported her passion completely. Her calls were more frequent than Tyler's, but almost always ended with her needing money for rent fabric or some industry event that would definitely be her big break. I never refused, even when it meant delaying repairs on my aging roof or putting off doctor visits for my increasingly troublesome back. My younger brother Marcus lived just 40 minutes away, but might as well have been in another country for all the support he offered. He had a decent job in sales, but terrible money management skills. Every few months, like clockwork, he would call with some crisis only cash could solve. Just until my next commission check. He always promised, yet the repayments never materialized. His wife Pamela made matters worse with her constant comparisons. Richard just bought Sandra another new car. Shame you could never provide that level of comfort for her. The comments stung, especially because I had helped Marcus with the down payment on their house. The house I was never invited to for holidays because it was too crowded with Pamela's family. Last spring, my body finally gave out. A herniated disc from lifting a beam incorrectly meant surgery and the end of my construction career. At 58, starting over was not really an option. My modest pension and Social Security would keep me afloat, but just barely. No more helping Ashley with her rent. No more emergency loans to Marcus. The timing could not have been worse, as my house needed serious repairs. The roof had started leaking during heavy rains, the ancient water heater was on its last legs, and the electrical system needed updating before it became a fire hazard. The first sign that my relationship with my family had fundamentally changed came during my recovery from surgery. Tyler called exactly once for less than 5 minutes. Ashley sent flowers but was too busy with a new collection to visit. Marcus stopped by for an awkward 30 minutes, mainly to tell me he was having money troubles and hoped I was getting back on my feet soon so I could help him out. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. The realization that my usefulness to my family seemed directly tied to my ability to provide financial support was a bitter pill to swallow. As I sat in my worn recliner staring at water stains on the ceiling, I wondered if I had somehow failed as a father and brother by creating relationships built on money rather than love. I had always thought family meant having each other's backs no matter what. But as my bank account dwindled and my physical strength faded, I was starting to question everything I thought I knew about the people I loved most. On a Tuesday morning in September, I stopped at Jiffy Mart on my way to physical therapy. I had a ritual of buying one lottery ticket each week, more as a moment of harmless fantasy than with any real expectation of winning. Dave, the owner, knew me by name and always greeted me with the same joke, "Here comes Bo, funding my retirement $1 at a time." That particular morning, I almost skipped buying a ticket. My back was giving me trouble, and I was preoccupied with calculating how to stretch my monthly pension to cover both medications and the increasing grocery prices. But habit won out, and I handed over my dollar for a quick pick ticket that I stuffed into my wallet without a second glance. 3 days later, I was half asleep in my recliner, the television providing background noise more than entertainment. The lottery drawing came on, and I lazily pulled out my crumpled ticket, a ritual I performed with zero expectation. The announcer called the first number 24. I had 24. Second number 53. I had that too. My heart rate picked up slightly. Third number 17. Fourth 38. Fifth 9. With each matching number, my posture became more upright, my eyes wider. When the final number 42 matched my ticket, I froze completely. My hands started shaking so violently that the ticket fluttered to the floor. This could not be happening. Not to me. Not to Bo Richards, who had never won anything bigger than $50 from a scratch card. I must have checked those numbers 20 times. I pulled up the lottery website on my ancient laptop, verifying each digit methodically, as though the numbers might magically change upon closer inspection. They did not. According to everything I could see, I had just won $62 million. Sleep was impossible that night. I kept the ticket in a sealed envelope inside my locked fireproof box, checking it hourly like a new parent monitoring a sleeping baby. By morning, I had convinced myself that I was missing something. Perhaps there was a second drawing I did not know about, or maybe I had misunderstood the rules somehow. The lottery office opened at 9. I was waiting outside at 8:15, clutching my envelope with sweaty hands. The security guard eyed me suspiciously until the doors finally opened. The young woman at the reception desk initially gave me the patient smile reserved for delusional seniors before actually checking my numbers. Her expression changed dramatically. "Sir, I need you to wait right here," she said, her professional demeanor suddenly intensified. Within minutes, I was escorted to a private room where 2 lottery officials verified my ticket, took my information, and explained the process for claiming a jackpot of this magnitude. "You have 2 options, Mr. Richards," explained Mr. Finley, a balding man with kind eyes and a serious voice. "You can take the lump sum payment, which after taxes would be approximately $31 million. Or you can receive annual payments over 30 years, which would give you the full amount, but spread out over time." I chose the annual payments. At my age, having guaranteed income for the rest of my life made more sense than a one-time windfall that I might mismanage. This decision would also make it easier to keep my winnings relatively private while I figured out my next steps. As I left the lottery office with paperwork clutched in my trembling hands, a strange thought occurred to me. For 35 years, I had given everything to support my family. I had sacrificed my body, my time, my own dreams, and now that I was unable to work, their interest in me had noticeably waned. What would happen if they knew about my sudden wealth? Would their attention and affection magically reappear? The more I thought about it, the more the idea took hold. This lottery win offered me more than financial security. It offered clarity, a chance to see my family for who they truly were. I made a decision sitting in my car outside the lottery office. I would not tell a single soul about my winnings. Instead, I would continue to pretend I was struggling financially and see who stepped up to help me the way I had always helped them. The following week, I met with a financial advisor recommended by the Lottery Commission. Janet Parker specialized in sudden wealth management and had helped numerous lottery winners navigate their new financial reality. In her sleek downtown office, I explained my unusual plan. I want to set up the payments through some kind of anonymous trust, I told her. And I do not want any public announcement of my winning if that is possible. Janet nodded thoughtfully. We can definitely maintain your privacy. Many winners choose to stay anonymous for security reasons. But may I ask why you want to hide this from your family specifically? I explained my suspicions, my years of one-sided giving, and my growing certainty that I was valued primarily as a financial resource rather than as a father or brother. This might seem petty, I admitted, but I need to know the truth before I decide how to share this blessing. Actually, it is quite sensible, Janet replied. Sudden wealth can destroy families if not handled carefully. Taking time to assess relationships before making any announcements shows wisdom, not pettiness. With Janet's help and that of a trust attorney, I established the Pine Haven Trust as the official lottery winner. The trust would receive the annual payments, and as the trustee, I would have access to the funds without my name being publicly connected to the winnings. The first payment would arrive within 30 days. As I drove home in my 12-year-old pickup truck, past the same potholes and familiar landmarks of my middle-class neighborhood, I felt like an undercover agent living a double life. On the outside, nothing had changed. I was still just Bo, the retired construction worker with a bad back and a house in need of repairs. But inside, I was transforming into someone new, a man with the power to see people's true colors when they thought he had nothing left to offer. The plan was simple but would require careful acting on my part. I would continue to live exactly as before, making no visible lifestyle changes. I would casually mention financial struggles when talking with family. And then when the moment was right, I would directly ask for help, just as they had asked me countless times throughout the years. Their responses would tell me everything I needed to know about the real nature of our relationships. The test had begun. 2 weeks after my secret lottery claim, I decided to host a family reunion barbecue at my house. I had not attempted such a gathering in years, mainly because I could rarely get everyone to commit to the same date. But this time I had a compelling reason to bring everyone together to establish my supposed financial difficulties in everyone's mind simultaneously. I called each family member personally, emphasizing that I really wanted to see everyone together while I still could. The slight implication of mortality was manipulative, perhaps, but effective. Even Tyler agreed to drive down from Seattle for the weekend. The day before the gathering, I went shopping with deliberate frugality, buying store-brand items and the cheapest cuts of meat for the grill. I wanted the meal to be noticeably modest, without seeming deliberately pathetic. I even left some repair supplies and medical bills visible on the kitchen counter, subtle props in my theatrical production. Sandra arrived first with her husband Richard, who immediately surveyed my property with poorly disguised condescension. "The place is really showing its age, Bo. he commented, running a manicured finger along my weathered deck railing. Have you thought about selling? This much yard maintenance cannot be good for your back. This house is all I have left, I replied truthfully. Besides, where would I go that I could afford? Sandra's expression shifted to something between pity and discomfort. She quickly changed the subject to their recent Mediterranean cruise, describing at length the absolute necessity of booking a suite with a private balcony. Tyler arrived next, checking his watch as he hugged me briefly. I can only stay until 6, he announced immediately. I have an early conference call tomorrow with our Tokyo office. Ashley arrived fashionably late, air-kissing my cheek, and immediately asking to use my bathroom to freshen up. When she emerged 20 minutes later, she glanced at the modest spread of food with visible disappointment. Is this all there is, Dad? I thought we were having a proper barbecue. It is all I could manage this month, I said, injecting just the right note of apology into my voice. The copay on my back medications really took a chunk out of my budget. Ashley's eyes glazed slightly, her attention already wandering to her phone. Oh, that is too bad, she murmured distractedly. Marcus and Pamela were the last to arrive, bringing a cheap bottle of wine that I recognized from the discount bin at the local supermarket. Marcus immediately pulled me aside. Hey, bro. I was hoping to talk to you about a business opportunity. He began, his eyes gleaming with familiar desperation. I only need about $5,000 to get in on the ground floor. The returns are guaranteed. I wish I could help, I said, gesturing vaguely toward the house. But I am barely keeping up with the repairs this place needs. The roof is starting to leak, and the water heater could go any day. Marcus's face fell instantly, his interest in our conversation visibly evaporating. Yeah, that is tough, he muttered, then brightened. Hey, is Richard here? I wanted to ask him about some investment advice. Throughout the afternoon, I carefully dropped references to my financial strain into various conversations. I mentioned having to cut back on my cable package, debating whether to sell my fishing gear, and wondering aloud if I should take a part-time job despite my back problems. The reactions were tellingly similar across the board, brief expressions of sympathy followed by rapid subject changes. Not one person offered practical help or even asked for specific details about my situation. Tyler checked his watch with increasing frequency. Ashley took numerous important calls that required her to step away. Sandra and Richard exchanged meaningful glances that clearly communicated their relief at having escaped a similar fate through their divorce. The most revealing moment came when I mentioned possibly having to postpone a necessary electrical system update due to cost. That sounds dangerous, Dad, Ashley commented momentarily, looking up from her phone. It is, I agreed, but unless I can come up with $2,000, it will have to wait. A heavy silence fell over the table. I looked from face to face, waiting. No one spoke. Finally, Richard cleared his throat and asked if anyone wanted more salad. By 6 o'clock, Tyler was already backing out of my driveway, citing his important morning call. Ashley followed shortly after, promising to call soon, but making no concrete plans. Marcus and Pamela stayed only long enough to finish the last beer in my refrigerator. Sandra lingered longest, helping me clear dishes with an air of martyrdom. You know, Beau, she said carefully, there is no shame in downsizing at your age. This house is really too much for someone in your condition. My condition, I echoed. Well, with your back and your situation, she clarified, gesturing vaguely at my modest living room. Richard knows some excellent retirement communities that are quite affordable with Medicare. I was 58 years old, not 85. The suggestion stung more than I cared to admit. After everyone left, I sat alone on my back porch with a lukewarm beer, watching the sunset. The test had yielded its first results, and they were exactly as I had feared. My family had registered my financial problems, but not one of them had offered concrete help. The same people who had not hesitated to ask me for thousands of dollars over the years could not bring themselves to offer even a few hundred when I hinted at needing it. The hollow feeling in my chest was not entirely from disappointment. There was also a strange sense of clarity, as though a fog was lifting. For years, I had made excuses for their behavior, convinced myself that family bonds transcended the transactional nature of our relationships. Now, with the stark evidence before me, I could no longer maintain that comforting illusion. The reunion had been a success, though not in any way that brought me joy. Phase 1 of my test was complete. It was time to move on to more direct requests for help. Over the next 4 weeks, I systematically contacted each family member with increasingly explicit requests for financial assistance. The first lottery payment had arrived safely, deposited into my trust account, but as far as my family knew, my situation was growing more desperate by the day. I started with Tyler calling him on a Tuesday evening, when I knew he would be home from work. "Tyler, I hate to bother you, but I need to talk about something serious." I began once pleasantries were exchanged. "What is up, Dad?" He sounded distracted, the faint sound of keyboard clicking in the background. "I am having some trouble making ends meet," I said, forcing vulnerability into my voice. "The property taxes are due next month, and with the medical bills piling up, I am afraid I might fall behind on my mortgage." This was a calculated exaggeration. My house was paid off, but Tyler did not know that. I had always kept my financial details private out of pride. "Wait, I thought the house was paid off," he said, surprising me with his attentiveness to that detail. "I had to take out a second mortgage for the roof repair 2 years ago." I lied smoothly. "It was that or let the whole thing cave in." "That is rough, Dad." The keyboard clicking had stopped at least. "How much are you short?" "About $3,000, I said. I would not ask if I had any other options." The silence stretched uncomfortably long before Tyler sighed. "Dad, this is really bad timing. We just put a down payment on a vacation property in Whistler, and Jenny is redecorating the main house. Our cash flow is kind of tight right now." I noted that his definition of tight included vacation properties and redecorating. "I understand," I said quietly. "I just thought—" "Look, maybe next quarter when my bonus comes through," Tyler interrupted. "Or maybe you could ask Ashley. She just got that big contract with that boutique chain, right?" "Right." I agreed, though. I knew from Ashley's frequent complaints that the contract was barely covering her studio rent. "I gotta go, Dad. Jenny's parents are coming over for dinner. I will call you on the weekend, okay?" He would not call on the weekend. We both knew it. Next, I invited Ashley to lunch when she mentioned she would be in Portland for a fabric sourcing trip. I chose a modest diner, making a point to order only water and the cheapest sandwich on the menu. "Are you on a diet, Daddy?" she asked, using the childhood name she reserved for moments when she was about to ask for something. "Just watching my budget," I replied. "Medical bills are piling up faster than I can manage them." "That is so unfair," she said, while ordering a $20 salad and an $8 smoothie. "Healthcare in this country is criminal." I nodded, then took a deep breath. "Ashley, I hate to ask, but I might lose my house if I cannot come up with some money for the mortgage and property taxes. I was wondering if you could help me out. Maybe a loan until my pension situation gets sorted out." Her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose in surprise. "Oh. Well, Daddy, you know I would if I could, but I just invested everything in materials for the new collection." "Actually—" Her expression shifted to the familiar look that preceded her own requests for money. "I was going to ask if you could help me out with my studio rent this month. The boutique payment is net 90 terms, so I will not see that money for 2 more months. I stared at her momentarily speechless. I had just told her I might lose my home, and her response was to ask me for money. I guess we are both in a tight spot, I finally managed. Yeah, but you have your pension and Social Security, right? I have literally nothing coming in until that payment. I nodded slowly, understanding completely now. I will figure something out. I said the phrase I had used hundreds of times throughout her childhood, when money was tight, but needs were pressing. You always do, Daddy. She smiled, reaching across to squeeze my hand briefly before returning to her expensive salad. Marcus was next. I called him on a pretext about borrowing a tool, knowing full well it would turn into him coming over to my house. When he arrived, I made coffee and steered the conversation toward my financial concerns. Before I could even make my request explicit, Marcus launched into his own troubles. Speaking of money problems, he interrupted my careful lead-up. I need a favor, Bo. That business opportunity I mentioned at the barbecue, the buy-in deadline got moved up. If I can get $5,000 by Friday, I am in. The returns are guaranteed, man. I could pay you back double within 6 months. Marcus, I was about to tell you that I am in serious financial trouble myself, I said firmly. I might have to sell the house if I cannot come up with the property taxes and some critical repairs. His expression cycled rapidly through surprise, disbelief, and then something like irritation. Seriously. You have always been the stable one. What happened? Life happened. Surgery happened. Getting older happened. I replied, a genuine edge creeping into my voice. Well, that is a real bummer, he said, setting down his coffee mug with a thud. But look at it this way. If you help me with this investment, I can definitely help you out once the returns start coming in. It is a win-win. I stared at him, wondering if he could hear himself. I do not have $5,000, Marcus. I do not even have $1,000. That is what I am trying to tell you. His face hardened slightly. Come on, you must have something stashed away. You always were a saver. Not anymore, I said simply. Marcus left 20 minutes later, his demeanor noticeably cooler after realizing I truly was not going to provide the money he wanted. His parting words stayed with me for days. You should really consider selling this place, Bo. It is too big for one person anyway. You could get a nice little apartment and bank the difference. The same suggestion Sandra had made. As if the home I had built my life in, raised my children in, was nothing more than a financial asset, to be liquidated at the first sign of trouble. I even reached out to Sandra, swallowing my pride to call her directly. I framed the conversation around needing advice rather than money, but made it clear that my financial situation was dire. I just do not know where to turn. I concluded my carefully constructed story. Sandra's sigh was audible through the phone. Oh, Bo. I always worried this would happen. You never were good with financial planning. The irony of this statement from the woman who had drained our joint accounts before leaving me was not lost on me, but I held my tongue. Richard might know of some part-time work that would not be too hard on your back, she offered. Maybe some kind of security guard position. You would have to get a uniform, though, and I know how you hate dressing up. Not one word about financial assistance. Not even a suggestion of a small loan to tide me over. That would be great, thanks, I said, knowing the offer of work would never materialize. And seriously consider what I said about downsizing. That house is just a money pit at this point. After these conversations, I spent a full day sitting in my backyard watching birds at the feeder I had built years ago. Each interaction had confirmed what I had suspected, but had not wanted to believe. The decades I had spent supporting my family financially had created a one-way relationship. I gave, they took. When the flow of resources reversed, so too did their interest in maintaining our connection. That night, I wrote everything down in a journal, recording each conversation while it was still fresh in my mind. Not for vengeance, but for clarity. I needed this record to ensure that when my emotions settled, I would not rationalize or excuse their behavior as I had done so many times before. Phase 2 of my test was complete, and the results were painfully clear. It was time for the final confirmation. 3 days after my conversation with Sandra, I sent a group text to everyone, "Need to discuss an urgent matter with family. Can you come to my house Saturday at 2 p.m.? It is important." The responses were telling in themselves. Tyler immediately replied that he had an unmovable client commitment. Ashley asked if Sunday would work instead, citing a brunch she had already planned. Marcus simply sent a thumbs-up emoji. Sandra did not respond at all. I did not push back or try to accommodate their schedules. This too was part of the test. By Saturday afternoon, only Marcus and Ashley had arrived, both looking uncomfortable in my living room, which I had deliberately left uncleaned. A pile of medical bills, mostly junk mail with medical logos, sat conspicuously on the coffee table. I had prepared carefully for this meeting, not shaving for 3 days, and wearing my most worn-out clothes. I even mussed my hair and applied a bit of powder under my eyes to appear more haggard. If I was going to stage a crisis, I would make it convincing. "Thanks for coming." I began, my voice deliberately weary. I would not have asked if it was not serious. Ashley glanced at her watch. "Is this going to take long, Dad? I have that brunch tomorrow, and I still need to prepare my presentation." "I will try to be brief," I promised, then launched into the scenario I had carefully constructed. The roof has started leaking badly in 2 rooms. The quote to fix it properly is $15,000. Insurance will only cover $3,000 because they claim it was existing damage that I neglected. I paused, letting this sink in. I have tried everything. The bank will not approve a loan because my debt-to-income ratio is too high with the medical bills. I have already sold my fishing gear and tools. I am at the end of my rope here. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. $15,000 is a lot of cash, bro." "I know," I said, looking down at my hands. "I would not ask if I had any other options. This is my home. The thought of losing it." I let my voice trail off, injecting just enough emotion to be believable without being melodramatic. Ashley was the first to speak. "Dad, you know I would help if I could, but I am barely keeping my studio afloat. That contract I mentioned has all kinds of strings attached, and I will not see real money for months." I nodded, having expected exactly this response. "I understand, sweetheart." Marcus cleared his throat. "Look, Bo, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. This house is way too big for you now. You could sell it as is even with the roof problems. Use the money to get a nice 1-bedroom condo or something. Low maintenance, no yard work, easier on your back." The 3rd time this exact suggestion had been made. I was beginning to think they had coordinated their talking points. "This is my home," I said simply. "All my memories with your mom before the divorce, raising you kids. Everything I have worked for is tied up in this house." "Well, sometimes we have to make hard choices," Ashley said, her tone suggesting she was imparting profound wisdom. "Sentimentality is expensive." "What about a government program?" Marcus suggested. "There must be assistance for seniors in your situation." "I am 58, I pointed out. "Hardly eligible for most senior programs." "Still, there must be something," Ashley insisted, already pulling out her phone. "Let me look up some options for you." I recognized this for what it was, the appearance of help without any actual sacrifice on their part. They would offer advice, suggestions, even research, but not a dollar of their own money or a minute of their time beyond this conversation. "Have you asked Tyler?" Marcus asked. "He is doing pretty well with that promotion." "He said his cash flow is tight right now," I replied. "Something about a vacation property in Whistler." Ashley rolled her eyes. "Of course. While you are about to lose your home, he is buying a ski chalet. Typical." The hypocrisy was staggering from someone who had repeatedly asked me for money while pursuing her fashion dreams in one of the most expensive cities in the country. The conversation circled like this for another 20 minutes, with increasingly creative suggestions for how I might solve my problem without any direct assistance from either of them. Government programs, reverse mortgages, taking in a boarder, selling collectibles I did not actually possess. "We will think about how we can help," Ashley finally said, standing up and signaling the end of the meeting. "Maybe I can spare a few hundred next month if that contract payment comes through early." "I appreciate you both coming," I said quietly. "It means a lot just to talk about it." "That is what family is for," Marcus said, clapping me on the shoulder. "We are here for you. Emotionally, you know." After they left, I sat alone in my living room for a long time. The final test was complete. Not one family member had offered meaningful help despite years of my sacrifices for them. The clarity was painful but necessary. I had spent decades believing in a family bond that it seemed had always been conditional on what I could provide materially. That night I cried for the first time since Sandra left. Not from self-pity, but from grief for the family relationships I had imagined rather than the ones I actually had. By morning, however, the grief had hardened into resolve. The test was over. Now it was time to rebuild my life based on truth rather than illusion. Over the next 6 months, I embarked on a carefully planned transformation. With the first 2 lottery payments safely in my trust account, I had substantial resources to work with, but I was determined to deploy them wisely and discreetly. The first order of business was addressing my home's issues without raising suspicions. I hired contractors from neighboring towns rather than local ones to minimize gossip. The work was done in phases, focusing first on internal problems that would not be visible from outside: electrical system, plumbing, water heater, internal roof repairs. The contractors used unmarked vans and always parked in my garage. To anyone passing by, nothing appeared to have changed. Meanwhile, I began reconstructing my social life outside my family circle. For too long, I had invested all my emotional energy in relationships that were proving unbalanced at best. It was time to diversify. I started volunteering 3 mornings a week at the local community center, helping with their home repair program for elderly and low-income residents. The work was light enough for my back to handle, and it connected me with people who appreciated skills I had spent a lifetime developing. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely valued for something other than my wallet. It was at the community center that I met Grace, a 62-year-old librarian who ran the center's small reading room. We started with casual conversations about books during coffee breaks, which evolved into lunch outings and eventually regular dinner dates. Grace was widowed, self-sufficient, and refreshingly straightforward. When I helped her install new shelves in the reading room, she thanked me sincerely, without assuming I would be available for every project thereafter. The contrast with my family dynamics was startling. "You seem surprised when people appreciate you without expecting more," she observed one evening over dinner. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "Only to someone who has been through something similar," she replied with a gentle smile. "My late husband's family treated me like a bank after he died. I finally had to distance myself for my own sanity." Her understanding was a balm to my still raw emotions. For the first time, I considered sharing my lottery secret with someone, but held back. Our relationship was too new, too precious to complicate with sudden wealth. That revelation would come later if things continued to develop between us. Another significant change was my investment in local businesses. Working through my financial advisor, I made anonymous angel investments in 3 struggling local enterprises: a family-owned hardware store that had supported my construction business for decades, a youth carpentry training program, and a small construction company specializing in accessible home modifications for people with disabilities. These investments were not just financial decisions, but ethical ones. I wanted my unexpected wealth to strengthen my community, not just my personal comfort. The satisfaction of seeing the hardware store expand its inventory and the youth program accept 10 new apprentices far outweighed any pleasure I might have gotten from flashy purchases for myself. I did make one significant personal investment, a small consulting business leveraging my decades of construction experience. Richard's Building Advisors officially specialized in helping homeowners manage renovation projects and avoid contractor scams, but much of my actual work was provided free to seniors and low-income families. The business gave me a plausible explanation for any lifestyle improvements I might gradually introduce, while also keeping my mind active and my industry connections current. Through all these changes, I maintained minimal contact with my family. I answered texts and occasional calls politely but briefly. I deflected questions about my financial situation with vague assurances that I was figuring things out. When pressed directly, I mentioned taking on consulting work that was helping make ends meet. I neither confirmed nor denied that my housing crisis had been resolved, leaving them to draw their own conclusions. Somewhat predictably, their interest in my situation waned as soon as I stopped actively seeking their help. Tyler's calls, already infrequent, dwindled to holiday-only communications. Ashley checked in more often, but her conversations inevitably turned to her own challenges and thinly veiled requests for support. Marcus stopped by occasionally, always with some new business scheme he was just sharing rather than pitching. Sandra, interestingly, was the most persistent, calling monthly, with suggestions about senior living options and occasional invitations to dinner that I politely declined. I suspected her interest stemmed more from guilt than genuine concern, perhaps exacerbated by Richard's recent health scares that had made her contemplate her own financial security and widowhood. As my external life transformed, so too did my internal landscape. The bitter disappointment that had initially driven my test gradually mellowed into something more nuanced. I still felt pain when reflecting on my family's failures, but increasingly I recognized the role my own behavior had played in creating unhealthy dynamics. I had enabled their financial dependence, had derived identity and purpose from being the family provider, had perhaps even subtly discouraged their self-sufficiency. This realization did not excuse their behavior, but it helped me approach the eventual revelation with greater wisdom and less desire for vindication. My goal shifted from exposing their selfishness to establishing healthier relationships moving forward, if that proved possible. By early spring, 6 months after my lottery win, my plan was complete. My house was fully repaired inside, though I had deliberately maintained its modest external appearance. My consulting business was established. My relationship with Grace was solid and bringing genuine joy to my life. I had real friendships through my volunteer work and community investments. Most importantly, I had achieved a measure of peace about my family situation, replacing resentment with clear-eyed acceptance. It was time for the final act of my year-long journey, the revelation. Working with my lawyer and financial advisor, I carefully planned every detail. The trust that had been receiving my lottery payments was restructured to include provisions for my grandchildren's education and certain charitable causes I cared about. I established clear boundaries around family support that would be generous but not enabling. I prepared myself emotionally for every possible reaction, from groveling apologies to angry entitlement. The stage was set for a moment of truth that would fundamentally reshape my family's future, one way or another. On a perfect Saturday in April, I invited my entire family to what I casually described as a housewarming without further explanation. The deliberate vagueness worked as intended, creating just enough curiosity to ensure everyone accepted. Even Tyler rearranged his precious schedule to attend, though he made sure I knew what a significant accommodation this was. The timing was carefully choreographed. My financial advisor, Janet, would arrive 30 minutes after the family gathered, creating a natural moment for the revelation. Grace would come slightly later after the initial shock had time to settle. I spent the morning preparing not just the substantial food spread, but mentally rehearsing my responses to every possible reaction. I was determined to remain dignified and compassionate, even in the face of potential hostility or sudden displays of affection that had been notably absent during my supposed crisis. Sandra and Richard arrived first, their expressions shifting from polite curiosity to poorly concealed shock as they entered my thoroughly renovated home. The worn carpet had been replaced with hardwood floors. The water-stained ceilings were now smooth and pristine. New furniture, tasteful rather than ostentatious, filled rooms that had previously contained my decades-old belongings. "Beau," Sandra stopped abruptly in the entryway. "What is all this?" "Just a few changes," I replied casually. "Come in. Everyone else should be here soon." Richard recovered more quickly than his wife, his eyes calculating as he surveyed the obvious expenditure. "Quite an improvement from the last time we visited. Did you take out another mortgage?" "Something like that." I answered vaguely, directing them toward the new leather sofas in my living room. Ashley arrived next, her fashion-trained eye immediately cataloging the renovations. "Dad, did you sell the house? Is this like a goodbye party?" "Not exactly," I said, accepting her air-kiss greeting. "All will be explained once everyone is here." Marcus and Pamela followed, with Tyler arriving last, visibly rushing, despite being perfectly on time. The atmosphere was charged with confusion and speculation as everyone accepted drinks and awkwardly complimented the changes to my home. "So, are you going to tell us what this is about?" Tyler finally asked, his corporate directness breaking the strained small talk. "The place looks great, but last we heard you were about to lose it to unpaid taxes and repair costs." All eyes turned to me expectantly. I took a measured sip of my water before answering. "I wanted everyone together for this conversation," I began carefully. "Before we get into details, though, I have something to show you." On cue, the doorbell rang. Perfect timing from Janet, who had been waiting in her car for my text signal. I opened the door and welcomed my financial advisor, introducing her simply as Janet, my financial manager, to the puzzled faces of my family. "Sorry to interrupt your gathering," Janet said professionally. "I just needed Mr. Richards to sign these trust modification documents before Monday." "Trust?" Marcus echoed, looking between us with growing confusion. I accepted the folder from Janet, who took a seat at my dining room table and began laying out various papers. My family gravitated toward us, curiosity overriding social niceties. "Yes, the Pine Haven Trust," I confirmed casually. "We need to adjust some provisions regarding the distribution schedule." "What is going on, Dad?" Ashley demanded, her patience visibly wearing thin. "Since when do you have a trust, and how did you afford all this?" She gestured broadly at the renovations. I met Janet's eyes briefly, receiving her subtle nod of encouragement. The moment had arrived. "I won the lottery," I stated simply. "Last September, $62 million. The silence that followed was absolute. 5 pairs of eyes stared at me in varying stages of disbelief. "That is not funny, Beau," Sandra finally said, her voice tight. "It is not a joke," I replied, nodding toward the papers Janet had arranged. The Pine Haven Trust was established to receive the payments anonymously. I am currently getting about $2 million annually after taxes and will continue to do so for the next 29 years. Tyler found his voice next at his business mind, probably already calculating figures. You won in September, but that was before. You asked us for money in October. You said you might lose the house. I did, I acknowledged calmly. The implications began dawning on each face as they processed what this meant. Ashley's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror as she remembered our lunch conversation. You were testing us, she whispered. I wanted to know who my family really was, I replied, keeping my voice gentle but firm. After decades of supporting all of you whenever you needed it, I wanted to see who would support me when I seemed to have nothing left to give. Marcus stood abruptly, anger flashing across his features. That is messed up, Bo. You lied to us, made us think you were desperate when you were sitting on millions. I did not lie about needing help, I corrected him. I just did not mention that I had recently gained the means to help myself. There is a difference. This is some kind of sick revenge plot, Pamela interjected, always ready to cast me as the villain. You wanted to make us feel bad, so you manipulated everyone. I shook my head slowly. This was never about revenge. It was about clarity. For 35 years, I gave everything I had to support my family. When I appeared to have nothing left to give, how many of you stepped up for me the way I always stepped up for you? The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. Richard, ever the pragmatist, was already shifting strategies. Well, water under the bridge now. We should celebrate this wonderful turn of events. 62 million. That is incredible, Bo. Simply incredible. It is life-changing, I agreed, but not in the ways you might think. I nodded to Janet, who handed me another document from her portfolio. This outlines the educational trusts I have established for my grandchildren, current and future. Each will receive funding for any college or vocational training they choose, plus a modest nest egg when they turn 30, provided they complete their education. Tyler and Ashley exchanged glances, processing the implications for their children. As for the rest, I continued, the bulk remains in trust for my own needs and for causes I believe in. The youth carpentry program downtown, the Veterans Housing Initiative, the community center's expansion. But what about us? The question burst from Marcus with unfiltered entitlement. Your family. I had anticipated this moment, had prepared for the hurt and anger it might trigger in me. Instead, I felt only a calm certainty that I was doing the right thing. Each of you will receive a one-time gift of $50,000, I said evenly. Not enough to change your lives dramatically, but enough to make a difference if used wisely. Beyond that, my financial relationship with all of you is concluded. The eruption was immediate and predictable. Protests about fairness, reminders of past generosity, theirs not mine, thinly veiled threats about family obligations and potential legal challenges. I let the storm wash over me, neither defending nor arguing, simply waiting for the initial reactions to subside. When the doorbell rang again during a momentary lull in the commotion, the interruption was almost comical in its timing. I excused myself to answer it, returning with Grace, whose calm presence immediately altered the energy in the room. Everyone, this is Grace Wilkins. I introduced her. Grace, this is my family, who I have told you so much about. The subtle emphasis on so much was not lost on my more perceptive relatives. Ashley's eyes narrowed slightly as she assessed this new variable in her calculations. Lovely to meet you all, Grace said warmly, her genuine smile a stark contrast to the strained expressions around her. Bo speaks of you often. Grace and I met at the community center where I volunteer. I explained, taking her hand comfortably in mine. She runs the reading program there. How nice. Sandra managed, visibly recalibrating her understanding of my new life. Over the next hour, as food was served and drinks refreshed, the initial shock gradually gave way to more strategic responses. Tyler, ever the businessman, pulled me aside to suggest investment opportunities we might explore as partners. Ashley suddenly remembered numerous occasions when she had supported me emotionally, if not financially. Marcus vacillated between resentment and clumsy attempts to re-establish our brotherly bond. Sandra was perhaps the most interesting to observe. After her initial surprise faded, a genuine remorse seemed to settle over her. "I should have helped when you asked," she said quietly, during a private moment. "Regardless of what you could or could not afford. That is what family does." "Yes," I agreed simply. "That is what family does." As the gathering wound down, I shared my plans for the future. The construction consulting business would continue focusing increasingly on helping veterans and at-risk youth learn building trades. Grace and I were discussing combining our passions into a literacy and vocational program. I would be traveling, some checking off destinations from my longtime bucket list, but Portland would remain my home. "I hope all of you will be part of this new chapter," I concluded, "but on different terms than before. Real relationships, not transactions. Genuine connection, not financial dependence." The responses were mixed, as I had expected. Tyler seemed almost relieved at the clarity of boundaries, perhaps recognizing the healthier dynamic it might create between us. Ashley fluctuated between contrition and calculation, clearly struggling to reconcile her genuine love for me with her habitually transactional approach to relationships. Marcus and Pamela departed early, his final handshake carrying both resentment and grudging respect. Sandra lingered longest, watching me interact with Grace with a complicated expression that suggested both regret for what might have been and acceptance of what was. "You seem happy," she observed as she prepared to leave. "Genuinely happy, not just rich." "I am," I confirmed. "The money helped solve certain problems, but the clarity was the real gift. Understanding who people really are, including myself, is worth more than any lottery jackpot." After everyone had gone, Grace and I sat on my back porch, watching the sunset in comfortable silence before she finally spoke. "How do you feel?" she asked simply. I considered the question carefully. Lighter, I decided. Like I put down a burden I did not even realize I was carrying. For so many years, I measured my worth by how much I could provide for others. Now I can just be valued for who I am. "And if they cannot do that," she asked gently, "then I will love them from a distance," I replied. "But I have hope. Real change takes time, but it starts with truth, and we finally have that." In the months that followed, those changes did begin to take shape. Tyler started calling weekly, our conversations focusing on his children and his life rather than money or business. Ashley's transformation was slower, but perhaps deeper, as she gradually recognized patterns in her other relationships that mirrored our dysfunctional dynamic. Marcus kept his distance initially, but eventually reached out when his latest venture collapsed, this time asking for advice rather than money. The educational trusts for my grandchildren ensured I remained connected to the younger generation, creating opportunities for genuine relationship building beyond material support. My work with the community center expanded, touching more lives and bringing purpose to my days that no luxury purchase could match. The lottery win had indeed changed everything, but not in the ways most people would expect. It had not bought happiness directly, but it had purchased something perhaps more valuable: the freedom to discover what truly matters in life and the clarity to build relationships based on love rather than obligation or transaction. The greatest wealth I discovered was not in my bank account, but in the authentic connections I was finally free to nurture the community I could support without depleting myself and the self-knowledge that had emerged from this challenging journey. So what do you think? Would you have done the same in my position, or would you have revealed your winnings immediately? Have you ever discovered someone's true colors when money was involved? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life experiences that remind us what truly matters. Your support means the world to me, and I am grateful for each of you who joined me on this journey of discovery. Until next time, remember that true wealth is measured in how we treat each other, not in dollars and cents.